The Nexus Station hung like a giant geometric paperweight in the void between the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxies. Its gleaming crystalline surfaces reflected starlight in patterns that supposedly represented unity, cooperation, and other lofty concepts that made for great PR materials across 37 different galactic civilizations. Today marked the commencement of the 479th Galactic Diplomatic Summit, an event held once every 12 solar cycles to negotiate everything from trade routes to waste management treaties. The Grand Assembly Hall occupied the heart of Nexus Station, a cavernous space designed by committee which explained why it managed to be simultaneously grandiose yet uncomfortable. Boasting architecture that tried to accommodate 37 different aesthetic and practical preferences and succeeded at precisely none of them. Ambassador H.K. Tal of the Rigelian Consensus tapped the ceremonial staff of discussion against the floor 3 times, the sound resonating through the hall with perfect acoustic precision. The 479th Galactic Diplomatic Summit shall now commence. All representatives, please assume your designated postures of respectful attention. Across the chamber, delegates folded, unfurled, compressed, or expanded according to their species' formal protocols. The Blovians inflated their ceremonial air sacs. The crustacean consortium of Betelgeuse clicked their pincers in the precise rhythm of diplomatic engagement. The gaseous intelligences of Tau Ceti dimmed their luminosity to the regulation brightness of formal proceedings. For 4 hours, species were announced one by one in order of their civilization's membership age. Each representative performed their culture's ritual entrance, some lasting nearly 20 minutes of undulating movements or pheromone emissions that required special atmospheric filters to be activated. Meanwhile, in a cramped preparation chamber just off the main hall, Jack Murphy of Earth was discovering that his formal diplomatic attire, a suit that had cost more than his first car, had a coffee stain on the left lapel. "Fantastic," Jack muttered, dabbing at it with a moistened tissue. "Just what I need before my big debut as humanity's last hope." The communicator on his wrist beeped. "Ambassador Murphy," came the clipped tones of his assistant. "You're scheduled to be announced in approximately 7 minutes. The proconsul of protocol wishes to remind you that Earth's entrance follows the greater hive of Beta Pictoris." Jack sighed, tossing the tissue into a receptacle that immediately disintegrated it into component atoms. "Remind me again why they picked me for this." "Because," his assistant replied with the patience of someone who had answered this question 14 times in the past week, "after the incident with our previous diplomatic team, Earth needed someone authentic and unpretentious who could, quote, cut through the bureaucratic nonsense." Jack snorted. "Right. The fancy way of saying I was the only idiot willing to take the job after Ambassador Williams told the Arcturian High Chancellor that his ceremonial headdress looked like a peacock mated with a disco ball." He straightened his tie, practiced his diplomatic smile once in the mirror, a grimace that fell somewhere between constipation and mild food poisoning, and headed for the entrance. As he walked, he couldn't help but think this whole affair resembled nothing so much as an interstellar high school prom, with all its ridiculous formalities and unspoken hierarchies. Through the doorway, Jack could see the greater hive performing its entrance ritual, 50 small insectoid creatures arranging themselves into a perfect 3-dimensional representation of their home, a solar system. The gathered delegates vibrated, flashed, or secreted their species' version of appreciative applause. Now announcing came the booming voice of the ceremonial herald, the representative of Earth, youngest member of the Galactic Confederation, Ambassador Jack Murphy. Jack took a deep breath, straightened his slightly stained suit jacket, and thought to himself, this is probably going to be a complete disaster. But hey, at least humanity can't get any lower on the galactic social ladder than we already are. With that comforting thought, he stepped through the doorway to represent the entire human race. As Jack strode into the Grand Assembly Hall, he immediately realized he'd missed a critical briefing memo. Every other species had performed an elaborate entrance ritual. The Zelborian ambassador had spent 15 minutes doing what appeared to be interpretive dance while reciting her civilization's founding principles in 12 tonal languages simultaneously. Jack, meanwhile, just walked in. The silence was deafening. Thousands of alien eyes or sensory appendages serving similar functions, fixed on him with what he could only interpret as expectation. He paused mid-stride, cleared his throat, and opted for humanity's time-honored diplomatic strategy when confused: improvisation. "Hey everyone," Jack called out with a wave. "Sorry if I'm supposed to do some fancy entrance thing. Nobody told me. So Earth says hi." The wave, a simple gesture on Earth, apparently translated across multiple species as an ancient Draconian war challenge. The reptilian delegates from Epsilon Eridani hissed and raised their neck frills in alarm. Several security drones immediately positioned themselves between Jack and the offended parties. "Ambassador Murphy," a voice dripping with barely contained horror spoke from behind him. "I am Vex Lore, Proconsul of Protocol. You have just performed the gesture of domination toward the Draconian hegemony." Jack turned to face an extraordinarily tall, thin being with pale blue skin and no fewer than 6 arms, each holding a different datapad. Vex Lore's expression suggested he was calculating exactly how many violations of diplomatic etiquette had occurred in the past 30 seconds. "My apologies," Jack said, attempting to recover. "Where I come from, it's just a friendly greeting." "Where you come from," Vex Lore replied with chilly precision, "is precisely the problem. Please follow the usher to your designated position. The sacred silence of contemplation begins in 3 minutes." Jack was led to Earth's spot in the diplomatic hierarchy, practically in the rafters of the chamber, the cosmic equivalent of the kids' table at Thanksgiving dinner. As he settled into the chair, designed for a species with 3 sets of knees, he noticed the other delegates pointedly not looking at him, which in diplomatic circles was the equivalent of staring and pointing. The sacred silence began with a resonant tone that vibrated through the chamber. According to Jack's briefing materials, this was a 30-minute period where all delegates contemplated the gravity of intergalactic cooperation. Jack, having pulled an all-nighter preparing last-minute notes, had a different idea. He stretched, yawned, and propped his feet up on the rail in front of him. The collective gasp of horror from 37 species created a small pressure drop in the chamber. Vex Lore materialized beside him, as if teleported by pure diplomatic outrage. "Ambassador Murphy," he whispered, though his whisper somehow carried the force of a shout, "remove your locomotion appendages from the Ceremonial Barrier of Equality immediately." "It's just a railing," Jack whispered back. "It is a 3,000-year-old symbol of the boundaries we must not cross in our relations with others." Vex Lore's eye stalks were now fully extended, a sign Jack would later learn indicated extreme stress. Jack quickly removed his feet. "Sorry about that. Long journey here. Just getting comfortable." "Comfortable." Vex Lore repeated the word as if Jack had suggested something obscene. "Ambassador, one does not get comfortable during the sacred silence. One contemplates the weighty responsibility of representing one's entire species." Across the chamber, Jack noticed a female presenting delegate with silvery skin and feathery antennae watching the exchange with what appeared to be amusement. When their eyes met, she quickly resumed the proper posture of contemplation, but not before Jack caught the equivalent of a smile. Meanwhile, the whispers had begun. The Jovian gas combines pulsated their disapproval in various shades of ultraviolet. The silicon consciousness representatives were transmitting signals at frequencies they thought humans couldn't detect, but thanks to his neural translator, Jack caught phrases like barbarian species and evolutionary hiccup. As the sacred silence continued for what felt like eternity, Jack made a mental note. So far, humanity's diplomatic position had nowhere to go but up. Probably. By the 3rd day of the summit, Jack had learned several important lessons about galactic diplomacy. Never make eye contact with a Betelgeusian unless you're prepared for a 7-hour conversation about algae farming. The word moist translates to 17 different obscenities in the Proxima language. And most critically, Nexus Station didn't serve coffee. This last discovery was, in Jack's professional diplomatic opinion, a crisis of interstellar proportions. "What do you mean there's no coffee?" he demanded of his quarters automated service unit. How did the delegates function before the 0600 ritual of morning acknowledgments? "Most species consume nutritionally appropriate stimulants approved by the Galactic Medical Consortium," the AI replied. "Human stimulants are classified as controlled psychoactive substances due to their effects on Centaurian neurochemistry." Jack stared at his empty mug with the desperation of a caffeine addict facing a 6-hour session on interstellar waste management treaties. Then he remembered he'd smuggled an emergency coffee machine in his diplomatic pouch, exploiting the loophole that Earth's representatives could bring cultural necessities for personal use. 40 minutes later, Jack entered the pre-session reception area with a spring in his step and a large, steaming travel mug emblazoned with Earth. "We may be new, but we're not taking your crap." A gift from the previous ambassador before his spectacular diplomatic flameout. The silvery-skinned delegate he'd noticed before approached him, her antennae quivering slightly. "That aroma is unusual, Ambassador Murphy. I am T. Lara of the Andromedan Concord." "Nice to meet you," Jack said, extending his hand before remembering and quickly withdrawing it. "Sorry, no war challenges intended. This is coffee, humanity's gift to the universe. Want to try?" T. Lara's large, faceted eyes blinked in sequence. "Is this permitted under Protocol Regulation 47.3? "Absolutely," Jack lied with the confidence only caffeine could provide. "Cultural exchange." T. Lara cautiously accepted the mug and took a small sip. Her antennae shot straight up, vibrated rapidly, then curled into tight spirals. "This is extraordinary," she said, her voice shifting up an octave. "It creates a sensation of accelerated thought processes." "That's the idea," Jack grinned, reclaiming his mug. "Gets the old neurons firing." As they entered the main chamber for that day's proceedings, Vex Lore intercepted them, his 6 arms juggling data pads with practiced efficiency. "Ambassador Murphy. Unauthorized consumables are strictly," he paused, sniffing the air. "What is that aroma?" "Cultural necessity," Jack said, brandishing his diplomatic pouch credentials. "Perfectly within my rights." Vex Lore's eye stalk swiveled in what Jack had learned was the equivalent of an eye roll. "Very well, but keep it away from the Centaurians. Their methane sacs are highly reactive to certain Earth compounds." The morning session progressed with mind-numbing discussions about standardizing gravitational measurements across different planetary densities. Jack paid minimal attention, focusing instead on savoring his precious coffee while surreptitiously observing the other delegates. He noticed T. Lara watching him with undisguised curiosity. When the ritual of mid-session refreshment began, Jack stood to stretch and disaster struck. His mug caught on his chair's third armrest, apparently designed for a tentacle, tipping coffee across his console and sending droplets arcing through the station's precise artificial gravity. Several drops landed directly on the ceremonial robe of Ambassador Krill Zik of the Krazik collective, an insectoid species known for their meticulous cleanliness and their easily stained exoskeletons. The chamber fell silent. Krill Zik's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Jack's translator interpreted as extreme distress. The brown liquid was spreading across the ambassador's iridescent blue carapace, leaving a conspicuous stain. Vex Lore appeared so quickly that Jack suspected he actually did have teleportation abilities. "This is unprecedented," he hissed. "The Krazik consider impurities on their exoskeletons to be deeply shameful. Ambassador Krill Zik will have to undergo 3 days of purification rituals." Jack's diplomatic career flashed before his eyes, all 2.5 days of it. Then he did what humans do best, he improvised. "Actually," Jack announced loudly, "on Earth, being marked by coffee is considered a great honor. It means you've been, chosen by the sacred being spirit for prosperity." The chamber went from shocked silence to confused murmuring. Jack continued, growing more confident. "Among human diplomats, we actually intentionally mark our most respected colleagues with coffee. It's an ancient tradition dating back to the first human diplomatic corps." T. Lara, catching on remarkably quickly, nodded solemnly. "The Andromedan Concord has studied Earth customs extensively. This is indeed a recognized practice." Krill Zik's antennae twitched uncertainly. "This brown substance is honorific?" "Absolutely," Jack assured him, approaching with exaggerated ceremonial steps he was making up on the spot. "In fact, I would be honored if you would accept this full marking as a symbol of Earth's respect for the mighty Krazik collective." Before Vex Lore could intervene, Jack had poured a small amount of coffee into his palm and with a flourish, it drawn what he hoped looked like a meaningful symbol on the ambassador's carapace. The chamber held its collective breath, then Krill ZK's mandibles spread in what Jack's translator identified as pleased surprise. The human honors us with their primitive but sincere ritual. The Kra-Zik collective accepts this marking. Other delegates began murmuring, some sounding almost jealous that they hadn't received the honor of a coffee stain. As Jack returned to his seat, Tilara whispered, "Impressive improvisation, Ambassador. I begin to understand why humans have survived despite their numerous evolutionary disadvantages." "Thanks," Jack muttered. "I think." Vexlor's expression suggested he wasn't fooled for a second, but even he couldn't argue with a diplomatic crisis successfully averted, even if the solution was, well, in his words as he passed Jack's seat, completely, absurdly human. The diplomatic crisis began, as many crises do, during a routine procedural vote on the third day of the summit. The Galactic Confederation was voting on new hyperspace lane regulations when Ambassador Krill ZK suddenly rose from his seat, still sporting his coffee honor mark, now deliberately preserved, and made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the assembly. "The Kra-Zik collective hereby threatens formal withdrawal from the Galactic Confederation unless our concerns regarding unequal treatment are addressed immediately." The chamber erupted. The Blovians deflated in shock. The gaseous intelligences flared so brightly that the chamber's filters had to compensate. Vexlor looked like he might faint, all 6 of his arms dropping datapads simultaneously. The Kra-Zik controlled crucial protein synthesis technology that many worlds depended upon. Their withdrawal would destabilize the entire galactic economy. The Arcturian High Chancellor, a massive tentacle being draped in ceremonial metals, rose to address the crisis. "This is most irregular, Ambassador Krill ZK. The proper procedure for grievances involves filing Form 7291B with the Committee of Concerns, followed by a waiting period of no less than 3 galactic standard months." Precisely the problem. Krill ZK's mandibles clicked furiously. Always procedures that somehow delay addressing the concerns of newer member species. The Kra-Zik collective has submitted 47 Form 7291 BS in the past decade. None have progressed beyond preliminary review. The senior ambassadors engaged in a flurry of formal diplomatic exchanges, each more stilted and procedure-bound than the last. Jack watched with growing disbelief as they completely failed to address the actual issue, instead focusing on proper channels and historic precedents. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to Tilara, who had taken to sitting near Earth's section after the coffee incident. "They're talking about everything except what's actually bothering the Kra-Zik." Tilara's antennae drooped slightly. This is how it always proceeds. The senior species maintain the illusion of listening while ensuring nothing changes. Jack frowned, watching Krill ZK's growing agitation. The coffee mark on the ambassador's carapace gave him an idea. "I need alcohol," Jack announced. Tilara blinked in confusion. Now may not be the appropriate time for human recreational chemicals. "Not for recreation," Jack explained. "For diplomacy. Real diplomacy. Do you have anything like a bar on this station?" 30 minutes later, as the formal proceedings continued their downward spiral, Jack approached Krill ZK's delegation carrying a tray with bottles from his personal diplomatic stores, a bourbon from Kentucky, vodka from Russia, and sake from Japan. "Ambassador Krill ZK said, bypassing the formal request to approach protocols on Earth, when we have real problems to solve, we do it over drinks. No procedures, no forms. Just honest talk." Krill ZK's compound eyes studied Jack for a long moment. "The Marked One suggests informal negotiations? Without the elder races present?" "Exactly," Jack confirmed, pouring small amounts into glasses. "Just us newer kids on the galactic block, having a straight conversation." Tilara, who had followed Jack's lead, added, "The Andromedan Concord would be honored to join such a discussion." To everyone's surprise, Krill ZK's mandibles clicked in what the translator identified as amusement. "The Kra-Zik find this approach refreshing." "Very well, human ambassador." As the formal proceedings dragged on across the chamber, Jack, Krill, Zik, Lara, and eventually representatives from 7 other younger species gathered in a corner. Jack introduced the Earth custom of toasting, which the aliens found novel and slightly alarming until Jack explained it wasn't a literal application of heat. 3 drinks later, Krill ZK was explaining the real issue. Our world developed synthetic protein technology that half the quadrant now depends on. Yet in Confederation matters, we are treated as children. The Arcturians refer to us as the young ones despite our civilization being 12,000 Earth years old. We face similar condescension, added Bo-Rak of the Capellan Federation, a furry being who had discovered a particular fondness for bourbon. Our mathematical models revolutionized hyperspace navigation, yet we hold no seats on the scientific council. Jack nodded, nursing his drink. On Earth, we call this old boys club behavior. The established powers pretend to welcome newcomers while keeping all the real influence to themselves. Yes, Krill ZK's mandibles clicked rapidly. Precisely this. They speak of equality while maintaining their dominance through procedural labyrinths. As the impromptu gathering continued, Jack realized something profound. Beneath their alien physiologies and cultures, these beings shared frustrations remarkably similar to human ones. They wanted to be heard, respected, and treated as equals. What if, Jack suggested, refilling glasses, we formed our own caucus? The newer members, working together instead of competing for scraps of influence? Lara's antennae curled thoughtfully. A unified voting bloc could not be ignored. The Kra-Zik would not need to threaten withdrawal if our collective concerns were properly addressed, Krill Zik agreed, his translator conveying thoughtful consideration. By the time Vexlor discovered their gathering, looking horrified at the unauthorized congregating, the outline of a new diplomatic alliance had been sketched on cocktail napkins, literally, as Jack had brought paper napkins from Earth, which the aliens found charmingly primitive. Ambassador Murphy Vexlor began, eye stalks extended in alarm. What exactly is happening here? Jack grinned. Diplomacy, Vexlor. Actual diplomacy. Behind him, Krill ZK stood and announced to the small gathering, the Kra-Zik collective withdraws its threat of leaving the Confederation provided our new coalition's proposals are given proper consideration. Vexlor's multiple eyes blinked in astonishment. You resolved the crisis? With alcohol and paper products? Sometimes, Jack said, clinking his glass against Krill ZK's chitinous appendage in another toast, and the best way to move forward is to skip the formalities and just get comfortable with each other. Word of Jack's unorthodox diplomatic solution spread through Nexus Station faster than gossip at a high school prom. By the next morning session, the chamber's atmosphere had subtly shifted. The younger species delegates sat straighter in their seats, exchanging knowing glances. The elder race's representatives appeared mildly uncomfortable, like aristocrats who just noticed the servants whispering among themselves. The Arcturian High Chancellor, not known for acknowledging changes in the status quo, tentatively addressed the elephant in the room. Before we continue with today's agenda, perhaps we should discuss the concerns raised yesterday by the Kra-Zik Collective and others. Jack suppressed a smile. The others referred to the impromptu coalition now being called the Comfort Caucus by station staff, a name Jack found hilarious and fitting. Lara leaned toward Jack. Most unexpected. The Chancellor has never deviated from the pre-approved topic list in 97 summits. First time for everything, Jack whispered back. Vexlor approached Jack's seat, his usual expression of diplomatic horror somewhat subdued. Ambassador Murphy, the procedural committee requests your input on how to proceed with these irregular discussions. My input? Jack echoed, not bothering to hide his surprise. I thought humans were barely tolerated at these functions. Vexlor's eye stalks drooped slightly in what Jack recognized as reluctant admission. Your methods, while completely contrary to established protocol, appear to have produced results. In that case, Jack said, rising from his seat, my first suggestion is that we lose the assigned seating chart. Hard to have a real conversation when some of us are practically in another zip code. What followed was nothing short of revolutionary in the history of galactic diplomacy. The carefully arranged hierarchy of seating established over centuries to reflect each species' status was abandoned for a circular arrangement, where everyone could see each other. Jack insisted they take a 15-minute break every hour, because even humans can't focus for 6 hours straight without a bathroom break, and we've only got one bladder. Most shocking of all, he introduced the concept of casual Fridays to the summit calendar. What exactly does this entail? Vexlor asked suspiciously. No ceremonial robes, no formal titles, first names only, and absolutely no ritual recitations, Jack explained. Just people talking to people. Or beings talking to beings, whatever. This is unprecedented, Vexlor protested, though with less vigor than usual. So is the Kra-Zik threatening to leave, Jack pointed out. Seems like unprecedented is working better than traditional right now. To everyone's surprise, Casual Friday revealed sides of the delegates no one had seen before. Without their ceremonial headgear, the Draconian representatives turned out to have colorful feathered crests they normally kept hidden, which they were actually quite proud of. The Jovian gas combines, freed from formal pulsation patterns, displayed complex color harmonies that several species found beautiful. Most surprising was Vexlor himself. Without his formal proconsul regalia, he revealed a dry sense of humor and an impressive collection of what he called diplomatic disaster anecdotes from his 3 centuries of service. You mean to say, Jack asked, barely containing his laughter, that the Blovian ambassador accidentally inflated his mating sac instead of his diplomatic greeting sac? In the middle of the ritual of solemn vows, Vexlor confirmed, his eye stalks curling in amusement. The Rigelian delegation still refuses to make eye contact with Blovians. Lara, who had become Jack's unofficial cultural interpreter, explained to the gathering how Andromedan humor involved elaborate puns that referenced the magnetic properties of celestial bodies, a concept so bizarre that its failure to translate became funny in itself. By the end of the day, 37 species had discovered something profound beneath their wildly different biologies and cultural practices, and they all valued sincerity over ceremony. The Kra-Zik collective formally withdrew their threat of leaving the Confederation, instead presenting a jointly authored proposal with the other junior species for procedural reforms. As Jack returned to his quarters that evening, feeling more optimistic than he had since arriving, he found Vexlor waiting outside his door. Ambassador Murphy, the proconsul said, his voice lacking its usual crisp formality. I must admit that your methods, while completely contrary to everything I have spent 3 centuries upholding, have merit. Jack smiled. Coming from you, Vexlor, that's high praise. The proconsul's eye stalks bobbed in what Jack had learned was thoughtful consideration. The founders established our protocols to prevent misunderstandings and conflicts between vastly different species. Somewhere along the way, the protocols became more important than their purpose. That happens on Earth too, Jack said. We call it bureaucracy. Rules created to solve problems eventually become problems themselves. Indeed. Vexlor extended one of his 6 arms, approximating a human handshake gesture. I believe I might have something to learn from humanities. Comfort with informality. Jack shook the offered limb carefully. And I could probably learn a thing or two about your protocols. How about we meet in the middle? Vexlor's mouth parts arranged themselves in what Jack recognized as the closest approximation of a smile his species could manage. A most diplomatic proposal, Ambassador. The final day of the 479th Galactic Diplomatic Summit featured several historic firsts. The first casual dress plenary session, the first unanimously approved resolution in 126 years, and the first standing ovation for an Earth delegate. As Jack walked to the podium to deliver humanity's closing remarks, he reflected on the transformation of the past week. The chamber no longer felt like a stuffy museum of diplomatic antiquity but a vibrant meeting place. Delegates from traditionally opposed species were chatting informally. Lara was teaching a group of Centaurians how to high-five without igniting their methane sacs. When I arrived at this summit, Jack began, I was told that galactic diplomacy was about preserving traditions and following protocols established by the founding species. As the representative of humanity, the new kids on the block, I was expected to learn these protocols and eventually assimilate into your customs. He paused, looking around at the gathered delegates. Instead, something unexpected happened. You all started assimilating some of ours. Not because humans are special, or better, we're definitely not, but because sometimes an outsider's perspective helps you see what you've been doing so long you've forgotten why you started doing it. Krill-Zike's mandibles clicked in the Kra-Zik expression of agreement. Several Blovians inflated their newly designated approval sacks. Earth has a saying, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." It means don't discard valuable things when getting rid of the unnecessary. The diplomatic protocols established by our predecessors have value. They prevented misunderstandings between wildly different species for centuries. But somewhere along the way, the comfort and authenticity got lost. Jack gestured to the chamber's new circular seating arrangement. This summit has approved the creation of a protocol reformation committee, with representatives from all member species, not just the founding ones. We've established casual communication periods as official parts of future diplomatic gatherings. And perhaps most importantly, we've remembered that beneath our different biologies and cultures, we all share a desire for respect, authenticity, and occasionally, a good drink. This last comment elicited a wave of translator-delayed laughter throughout the chamber. In human diplomatic training, what little I received before being shipped out here, they taught us that the goal isn't just to prevent conflict, but to build genuine relationships. It's hard to hate someone you've shared a laugh with, even if they breathe methane and you breathe oxygen. Jack raised his coffee mug, which had become something of a mascot for the Reformed Summit. To new friendships, honest conversations, and comfortable diplomacy. Across the chamber, delegates raised various appendages, vessels, or sensory organs in response. The ceremonial herald, breaking with 4 centuries of tradition, spoke without formal introduction. The 479th Galactic Diplomatic Summit is hereby concluded, and good job, everyone. As delegates prepared for departure, the Arcturian High Chancellor approached Jack, his massive form moving with surprising grace. Ambassador Murphy, the High Council has created a new position it wishes you to consider, Chief Comfort Officer of Galactic Relations. Jack nearly choked on his coffee. I'm sorry, what? It has become apparent that the Confederation requires someone to challenge our assumptions periodically, to remind us when custom has overtaken common sense. The Chancellor's translator conveyed something like embarrassed admission. Your species seems particularly suited to this task. I'm honored, Jack said, genuinely surprised. But I should warn you, give a human a title like that, and you never know what they'll do with it. We are counting on it, the Chancellor replied. Later, as Jack supervised the packing of his diplomatic pouch, now containing gifts from 17 different species, but including a vial of luminescent gas from the Tau Ceti delegation that they assured him was purely decorative, not mildly explosive, Tilara came to say goodbye. Humanity has made quite an impression, she said, her antennae curled in the Andromedan expression of amusement. The Jovians are already planning to incorporate high fives into their formal greeting rituals. God help us all, Jack laughed. Next summit they'll be wanting to try fist bumps. Actually, Tilara said, the Draconian hegemony has already begun practicing those. They find them less threatening than their traditional greeting of ritual teeth-baring. Jack shook his head in wonder. And to think I was worried about making a good impression. You made an authentic one, Tilara corrected, which proved more valuable. As the delegates departed Nexus Station, returning to worlds scattered across 2 galaxies, Jack noticed one final scene that confirmed humanity's lasting impact on galactic diplomacy. In a quiet corner of the departure lounge, Vexlor, still proconsul of protocol but now also deputy chief of comfort, had removed his formal shoes and propped his feet up on a table, 6-fingered hands folded behind his head, his eye stalks relaxed. When he noticed Jack watching, he didn't immediately snap to attention as he would have a week ago. Instead, he raised one languid hand in what was unmistakably a wave. Comfortable, proconsul? Jack called across the lounge. Remarkably so, Ambassador, Vexlor replied. Remarkably so. Jack smiled. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not by mastering alien protocols, but by being unapologetically comfortably human. And somehow, that had been exactly what the galaxy needed. After all, as another Earth saying went, sometimes you had to shake things up to help everyone settle down.